Okay,
All right.
perfect. We are live. So why don't we start with a little introduction? I would say let's do a little more than brief introduction because the crux of today's discussion is our background. We are not going to discuss stock charts or valuation of foundry and all that. If
Yep,
anybody
exactly.
is trying to look for that, I think it's a wrong discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, I'm the VP of technology at an ed tech company. And I've been in the industry for 20 years. um, Mostly as a software architect, and then recently more on the executive level and management level. Um, and to me, like when I first saw or when I first heard about Palantir, I was really intrigued, and that was a long time ago. But like when I finally got to see it, I was like, oh my god, this is so much better than sort of what I had in my mind. And then I'm getting to learn a lot more about it, now. So yeah, I mean, I have some experience with it. I'm getting more experience with it as we speak, and yeah, I see this future coming that it's going to play a key part in. So that's why I'm so excited about it.
That makes sense. And from my background, I mean, my background was more math physics, and then I ended up doing applied geophysics. So I was more of a guy who was more coming from algorithm side and who knows a bit of programming just to get the things done. Then I started in oil and gas in seismic processing, which is pretty much a kind of an advanced signal processing kind of a work.
Yep.
Move towards more into the statistical and numerical geomodeling and simulation part. Eventually, over the time, I moved into the project management part. So learn other things as you move along in terms of like production engineering, drilling engineering.
Yep.
So I didn't have like these boundaries that I should learn this. I mean, this is something that happened, and then eventually I ended up doing my MBA quite late in my career actually, and moved to BCG.
Yep.
And this was also the time which I call like the digital transformation phase one, where everybody was euphoric, and very few knew exactly what they were doing. So I was
Yeah.
right in the middle, and this is actually I get to learn things that it is one thing to say digital, and I was in the technologies for a long time, but I started seeing like the kind of struggle everyone is going through.
Oh yeah.
And Palantir popped up on my radar when some of my Silicon Valley friends from IIT started talking about it. And then I saw this deal they did with BP. I mean, oil and gas was my space. I mean, I
Yeah.
saw the terms of the deal of BP and I said, I have never seen like this ever in oil and gas. Even today, I have never seen anything like that. As I am talking about the largest companies in service sector going along with largest companies in oil and gas operator, and nobody is making even 50% like that. So
No.
what is BP's play here? What they are trying to achieve? With the time, I actually get to talk to people in different companies who are using Palantir,
Yep.
and they were all praised for it. The only people who complained to me about Palantir were always the financial controller, and they said it's too expensive. And said, but if it's expensive, then you say that there is no value for money here. They say, but we cannot prove that. People put
Define
quite a strong
expensive,
just.
man. Like I always tell people, like define expensive because every time you sneeze, $1 million is coming out over here. So like that's I always laugh when people do that because it's like the cost of recreating Foundry is like 100x of just using Foundry. So it's like I don't
That
know.
is true.
You always got to force people to put parameters around that. Like define expensive in what context? Are we talking about nickels and dimes? Or are we talking about like real money here? Because it's kind of
No,
ridiculous when people.
that is true. You know what I learned in my management time is that there's a lot of management people for whom the management is all about cost management,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
sometimes forget about growth or valuation or in terms of like creating value. They get so much focused on cost. I mean, it looks so smart when you are sitting in a meeting and you are saying cut cost here, cut cost there, especially given the decline in oil and gas that happened over the 7 and 8 years. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it's not gonna. It's a short term tactic. I mean, capital discipline should be part of your DNA, irrespective of whatever the market conditions are.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that's interesting here is that application in BP. And like I used to work for a company called EPSway, and they installed sensors in factories, and all that sensor data would be aggregated through our system, and you could do visualizations with it, and people would try and build statistical models to figure out like how to optimize your equipment. But like the power of machine learning to come into that space and do like anomaly detection and advanced types of detections that can like really predict equipment failure days before it happens, right? that's insane. And like, but to do it, if you think about the scale of it, like how many sensors are we talking about? How big is that data stream? And how do you continually update that system to get better versions of those models out in those rigs or wherever it's going to be? That's a hard problem. That was like a massive engineering challenge when I was at EPS Way. Like, how do you just get the sensors in the factories? How do you change them out?
No, that's true.
Yeah.
I remember in 2005, like you kind sorry, I stopped you. I think you finished
Yeah.
first.
Well, yeah, it's just I think that the interesting thing about Foundry is a lot of people overlooked it, which is Apollo, and like people haven't really like when you talked about you briefly mentioned like some of the engineering challenges we're facing implementing machine learning, getting it into places. One of the biggest ones is just the operations side, and like trying
That's
to
true.
figure out. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive, massive challenge, and there's a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting in that space, But for some reason, everyone's decided they want to own it. They want to build, they want to operationalize it themselves. It's like I can't figure it out, and so the smart people, I think, are opting for Palantir, especially these big companies who have big problems, for sure, for sure.
So I have a hypothesis like why people started doing this by own. So during my projects, so what happened like what call like a digital transformation phase one, when so in most of the industrial company the IT used to be the support function, and when the digital happened, there was like a period of friction that should IT is going to have a elevated role or is it really going to become the core function of the company.
Right.
During that time, a lot of people been hired from companies like Amazon, Google, in companies which are like normal industrial sector. Now, these people, when they came in company, they came from a background where their idea was always if there is a problem, that means you need to write a code.
Right.
So when people like us in energy start talking to them that you need to do, so we need to build this. And since these are the people who are running, so this is what happened in my view, and I see a lot of failures also. Some good innovations as well. I cannot say it entirely failure. Some really eye-popping things also came up. But
Yep.
as a whole, what happened is that everybody was reinventing the wheel for themselves. The challenge
Yep.
in that what I felt was that yes, some of you will succeed. The question is your wheel going to be the best in the market? So the question is not about whether you can succeed or not. Can you really create the best product? And it's not
Yep.
your core function. It's not your core business proposition. So this is where I think this build thing
Yep.
kind of got. And to be fair, also like if you see 4 5 years back, the kind of tools and I mean the state of even AWS, it
Oh
was
yeah.
not that integrated as it is today now,
Yeah.
and
Totally.
so it has changed a lot. So let's start from something very simple. I think this is where a lot of people are still struggling.
Yep.
Even I struggle sometimes to explain to people what is difference between a product like Palantir Foundry versus Snowflake versus Databricks versus data robots. I mean, like we hear these terms. I mean, I
Right.
have my own definition and understanding, but I want to get you as an expert. How do you see what is Palantir Foundry? What is Snowflake? What is Databricks? What is data robot? What is common? And then
Right.
what is very unique to all these?
Well, I think the major difference, I try to explain it on Jackson's channel too, is like Foundry is an ecosystem, right? It has an opinion about how you build software, about how you ship value on that platform. It is opinionated in some sense about the operations, and so it's not just like a toolbox. Like Snowflake and Databricks is like a toolbox, a lakehouse in which you can do all your statistical analysis. You can build your data pipelines. You can clean that data. You can do science on the data and deploy it. It sounds a lot like Foundry, right? Like you're thinking, oh my god, that's Foundry. That's part of Foundry. That's not all of Foundry either. So like I think, and I'm under NDA with them, so I can't get into all the parts of Foundry, but it's a much bigger platform than that. And literally like it's made so that you could bolt on a lakehouse. Like if you want to use Databricks, dude, it's like probably the best tool to integrate with Foundry. It's like Foundry. This is not a secret. It's Foundry heavily leverages Spark for its own lakehouse functions. So you can see their custom distribution of Spark on GitHub, and they've added some features and done some bug fixes in there to provide more value for their customers, just like Databricks does for their version of Spark. So it's an opinion ecosystem, but that's a good thing. Like I was telling Jackson, when you get unopinionated developers building software for really complex mission critical companies, and they have an opinion about the way that should be operationalized, and the developers don't share that opinion, you get a train wreck. It's like everything, the shit hits the fan because the developers have gone off the rails and built something that just won't deliver value. And like, there's a good book called A Seat at the Table, where they dive into this perception of IT. And for like a really long time, IT was something you had to control. like the approach. Yeah, the approach for the C-suite was like, we better put some freaking rails on you guys and some handcuffs so you don't like blow up the organization, And like you said, they reined it in other areas, but for some reason, ML has been given free reign to just do whatever they want again. And I think that's a terrible idea. There's an 87% failure rate. The only thing with a higher failure rate than ML is right now is our startups generally, which have a 90% failure rate. So for some reason, businesses around the world have decided they're going to be the 1 in 10 that succeeds in this space, right? So I think that's the missing part that people aren't getting, is that Foundry has an opinion about the way you operationalize this space. And that's why Palantir's customers don't fail at an 87% rate. In fact, leading at a very high rate. You see that in the re-ups of the contracts and the value they're delivering. But that's a slow process too. That's not something you can just like turn on and scale to the same amount of customers that Databricks or Snowflake can scale to right away. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's like AWS, when it launched, people didn't understand the value. It took a long time to train developers on the mindset and why it's valuable. And it took almost 10 years to do that. So, like I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think this is going to be a long transition. But yeah.
So let me share like a couple of reflections I have, and let me know if they are true. So one thing which I always felt, I think Snowflake got a growth hack because their solution was built on SQL. And when they started, actually 99% data engineers came from SQL background. So it was quite a natural match. I mean, the people felt comfortable coming to it. There was a time in 2005, I felt, I think, like you said, the IT control. I think there was a brief period it succeeded, like when everybody was transitioning from Solaris, SGI. I mean, I came from that time. So it was a very painful if you have learned Unix and Linux, and then they asked you to use Windows as a desk. I mean, like the workstation. I mean, Windows as a workstation was a very tough pill to swallow those days. I mean, especially if you have a bit of nerdy bone. But it happened, and then I mean, of course, like I always thought that we'll move to the world of cluster, but I think that was my mistake. I mean, clusters stayed relevant in my industry all the time, but I think everybody even thought about that cluster will be the next stage. I think people were still looking for cloud, but nobody knew what it would look like. I think if you see that cloud computing has given us, this is what people thought clusters will do.
Yeah. But what was funny though is like you can see the parallels there, right? Between cloud and something that the industry was already moving towards anyway, right? But like what was the reason that people decided not to just jump on cloud as soon as it emerged? Like why didn't AWS just get immediate adoption? I think it comes down to a lot of people like control over a domain, and if you take away that control over that domain, like people start looking for purpose and meaning. They're like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, this is what I do. You're taking this away, but like what people don't understand is, no, I'm giving to now do more, so now you don't have to waste your time doing these things. Now you can focus on doing these things. But the natural reaction by a lot of people is just kind of insulating themselves from change. And I think that's like kind of human instinct. Human beings love to do that. And I think that's why, like, when people failed to see what cloud was giving them, the similarities and things they were already pursuing, because they felt threatened by it, And I think that's this kind of same thing they're feeling when they see something like Foundry, In my opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. I know in my industry, and I up to an extent, I know in the mining, I think this data paranoia was so big. Like, for example, if you take a case of oil and gas, I mean, you see the companies in Middle East, they were not even ready to share like what's the reserve space look like before, like for example, Aramco went for IPO. So there was always like this culture, and that idea is like how to strategically hide. And I know this, like for example, I mean, I was working on one place, there was this international boundary, and I knew there was a 1 billion barrel field here. So chances of having a good oil discovery on this side. So the data can become very strategic at times. But I think what people miscalculated, in my opinion, see, data is data. At the end of the day, until and unless you turn it into action, it's useless. It doesn't matter how important the information is. And I think
you could drown in it too, right? Like you could just be drowning all that data. You don't even know what to do with it. It's like it becomes useless at a certain point if you don't If I don't know, it's one of those things. But we pivoted from that, you know, like we went from there was that phase, especially in like 2017, where people were just like, I don't know what to do with all this data. You told me to collect all the data. I've got all the data. Now what do I do with it? And then 2018 was really, and 2017, 2018 is really when cloud providers democratized more machine learning and it became affordable to actually do something with it, you know? So there's like, I think there's these like broader industry trends that converge on what you're talking about as well. There's this like inflection point where these waves that are coming, they merge, you know, and it's driven by a lot of external factors. Because before, like, if you wanted to do machine learning on all that data, you know how much money you would be spending to like actually analyze it. It was fucking insane, you know, like the amount of money people would spend on ML initiatives before cloud democratized it was incredible. So it's like,
I remember. I mean, I agree. I mean, I used to run a lot of neural net, especially for log data and some
yep,
seismic, and it was insane. I mean, it pretty much goes down to like how strong your machine is, and because that, I mean, when you're running on machine, at the end of that, it comes back to the machine. So let me take this question. I think it's the
yeah,
question because I have this. So at the end of the day, I think I felt a lot of time, and I think you have stated as well in past that, see, my idea is always like you cannot scale something if developers cannot access it. I mean,
yep,
the worst thing a developer wants is that you developer comes to you and you say it will be available in 2 months or it will be available in future, but no date given.
yep,
I mean, I know it sucks, and I know developers. They say, "Fuck it, we don't want to care about it. We'll use what is available today."
yep.
So the question is that this whole idea of like citizen developers, like, is Palantir approaching that point, especially with the recent announcement where you are seeing that yes, it will be becoming more and more readily available in near future than far to more developers moving forward.
Yeah. I can't speak for Palantir, so I understand. Like, I don't work for Palantir. I have somewhat of a relationship in that I'm trying to get the product in. But let me just, I can answer this, but it's going to be speculative. So don't take this as like, this is Palantir
No, it's
speaking. It's not, it's just me. Yes, they are for sure, in my opinion, 100%, but it's baby steps, people. And I don't want to, I'm going to say something that I don't want like people listening, if they're, you know, if there are people listening that work at Palantir, like this is just a joke generally, like it's not infosec, it's info sucks, right? So like the security people are not exactly thrilled at like open sourcing this thing to people, you know? So yeah, info sucks is going to be a barrier, I think, in the short term. And you know, they're a company that does some pretty awesome work in a classified space. So it's I don't think it's unreasonable for them to kind of slow walk the release to the developers, and they need to make sure they do it right, you know. So I guess it's just be patient, but yeah, I think that's coming relatively soon, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Like in my industry, and I have given this feedback back to Palantir also during my business meetings, is that a lot of people in my industry don't even know what you do. Yeah, people have
Yep.
started hearing your name, and sometimes they are sitting with the people from other companies like Snowflakes, Databricks, and I mean these executives talking to them, and you guys just don't reach it. So you are leaving money at the table at times,
Yep.
and this is actually the, so this is why I always felt like people talk about their growth. I said, what growth are we talking about? They are not even able to reach market yet. So
Yeah,
the growth what they have is they are constraining their growth themselves.
they are. Yep, for sure. They're leaving a lot of money on the table, and that's why like they can't operate in a vacuum, right? Because remember I was saying before, there are these waves that come together and they kind of converge and they push the industry forward. I mean, like Facebook wasn't the first social media company, right? Instagram
Yeah.
wasn't the first photo sharing app. You know, like first doesn't mean you're going to be the best, and it's because there are changes in technology that also happen, right? And this machine learning revolution is just getting started. I mean, we literally just got the tools in our hands in a way that's cost effective. And all these things that are happening down market with Databricks and Snowflake, they're going to converge with that wave as well. And if you haven't like done the hard work and gotten developers on the platform by the time they do, it's not going to matter how good your system is. If you only have 300 customers and they've got 30,000, you're going to get smashed. And it's just the reality of how this industry works. So I think that it's not only they're leaving money on the table, but that really doesn't matter in the short term. It's that this wave could pass you by if you haven't, you know, done the hard work, laid the foundations for a community that like Databricks has a huge community, dude. like huge.
I
And
know.
they're
It's
awesome in Snowflake too, you know. So yeah,
no,
I
it's
think
funny. It's funny. I mean, once I appeared for AWS interview,
yep,
and the AWS role, they go for this 5 round of interviews, the leadership principle base. So I appeared actually twice, and so what happened? Like one of that person who interviewed me, uh, she left to join Databricks. Another person left to join Google, and they remembered me from my interviews from AWS, and they approached me, and I was like surprised, like how hot the hiring is nowadays.
yeah.
I mean, like
Oh,
they
dude,
are literally,
people are
people.
making
I mean,
offers right now to candidates with no interview, like
yeah,
zero interview, just throwing offers at them. It's insane. It's like,
is
yeah,
I mean, I took the offer later. I think I went back to Schlumberger to lead the digital strategy part.
yep,
But then I realized, I mean, I just want to do something on my own for the time. But I realized the market is so hot. And the reason is that now people have just started scratching the surface that how much they can do with the data.
yep, yep. I think so too. Like, to address this question here, like as far as like why is the growth so slow? I think you nailed it, which is they're constraining themselves. You know, like that's why the growth is so slow. It's not that there's anything wrong with the product, but also keep in mind, like, a lot of those videos I put out about why they need a pool model versus a silo model also constrain growth, and it's a very real problem. And like
Hmm.
that's to when I talk about the design decisions that need to be made in software to enable a pool model for SaaS, it's really deeply embedded, right? You're talking about scope, like authorization is scope to a function execution, not a resource. Okay, so like that's a big change. If you haven't written your code like that, think of all the places you're gonna have to go back and implement that. You know, it's pretty mind blowing. And then like, things like metering, like just to understand like which like client is using what resource and how do you bill for that. Like that's also a thing that has to be deeply embedded in your code. Now, like Snowflake is the only one that, in my opinion, that has a really cool model because it's like this hybrid model. It's like you have shared like a shared data infrastructure, but your compute is share nothing. And that's like a really neat approach. And I think that's going to enable a lot of scaling for them. And this is also something that Palantir is going to have to address, because I think that not only are they kind of constraining themselves, but I think their system is going to be constraining them as well. And it's the same thing for Databricks. Databricks uses a similar type of approach. I think that Databricks and Palantir are kind of in that same boat where Snowflake maybe is a little bit out in front, but either one of them could easily move to like a cloud abstraction model, kind of like what Snowflake built. But they can't sleep on that either, So it's like it's another thing
Because
that, yeah, they're gonna have to
they
look at.
need SaaS layers and microservices to ensure that their layer is utilized. I think that's the challenge for them.
Yeah.
So, you made a very good point. I mean, and let me just dig into this one. So when I compare Databricks, Palantir, and Snowflake in general, so
Yep.
like to discuss, so in my opinion, I always realize that Palantir is held back by its own solutions and the way it is going for business go to market. One other thing what I realize is that the way Palantir works is, especially with its founder at Gotham, that instead of going for a lot of time like this enterprise solutions, they focus on business problems. That which what are your top business problems and how can we get around it. That's why in past I think they were spending a lot of time, which is interpreted sometime and people term them as a consulting company. Because it was also the time when they were also trying to understand, like you rightly said, that they were trying to figure it out what is the right way to write the code if we are going to address these problems, which is very different from how traditionally softwares are written or developer works. So it
Yep.
was very, that's why one of the reason I felt that their main advantage came is time to value. So a lot of people I talk and that they have adopted Foundry, the biggest constraint they had at the time of adopting Foundry was they literally had no time,
Yeah.
and they were going in discussions and they said enough is enough, we go with Palantir. And the kind of the deadline they have given, that they want solution now as early as possible. So that became, and most of the time when this kind of situation comes, these problems were very also critical and impact. It's not like 5%, 10%. This is like 2x, 3x,
So
4x kind of performance.
you have just glimpsed the future right there. And what I mean by that is, like, remember that 87% failure rate that I was talking about before in ML initiatives that are built on Snowflake, right? And built on Databricks? Like, at some point in the future, the CEO is going to sit down with the team that she spent $50 million on in 3 years, and they haven't delivered something that can actually deliver business value. And that CEO is going to be like, you have a month to deliver business value to me, or I'm going to purchase this platform over here that my competitor's using and kicking my butt with, you know? And that's going to be the future. All these initiatives we're talking about are going to fail. Statistics doesn't lie, you know?
Yeah.
That failure rate ain't going anywhere. And there's a lot of reasons for the failure rate. You know, it's like management wants to ask stupid questions about the data. No, the machines can't tell you that. Like, there's that problem. The data quality sucks. There's that problem. But there's also this problem of like the engineering side, which is massive, you know, and everyone is just underselling the amount of work that goes in there and the amount of spend that goes in there. And then the product owners of those initiatives are overselling what they're going to deliver, you know?
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, people oversell anything. I mean, to and one other thing, and correct me. I mean, if it is, um, see, internally what is happening is that, like I said, there was like a digital phase one where everybody was excited. Then the
Yeah.
digital phase two, which I say now ongoing days, where people have realized that everything doesn't work. You need to be very selective whom to choose partner and everything.
Exactly.
But still, it's a lot of resources being utilized. But my view is like at the end of the day, people will say enough is enough. I mean, if and what is happening now, like one of the thing which held back me on Palantir a lot of time is that I thought like when a company is in a super scale mode, there should be some milestone and sign. So to me, milestone is, are they offering certification in a very democratic way? They
Yeah.
have started something, but still need to be. Can you
Still
access
behind the
it?
paywall though, right? Like it's
Yeah.
behind the paywall. So
Yeah.
we're,
And can you access them by on your? I mean, like for example, in my case, I was lucky that I was trying to evaluate for Foundry for Builders. I have connections.
yeah.
I managed to get a meeting. But like for example, like when I see like there is SPAC, I mean, and I have my own theory like why they are going into it. But if you see like they have started presence in some sectors, they are still not
Yeah.
covering a lot of market, but it's in patches. It's a Swiss cheese model,
Yep.
and I need these cheese holes to expand to understand that they are reaching that point where they can hyper scale. And this is why like I took as like for example, now they came up. I was very happy when I saw this developer thing, but I think we both understand that it's just a start. The mature developer community to build that and not provide the resources they need,
Yep.
uh, it's a long way they need to take from here, and it will be
It's a
interesting
multi-year
how they
process, right?
support
Like
the. Yeah.
building a developer community doesn't happen overnight. That takes years. So it's like, yeah, they got to get busy. But I think the events you've seen recently have showed you just how seriously they take that problem, you know? So like it's kind of interesting that like as soon as we started talking about this, like the next day, basically they started talking in a way whether it's that they'll be the next AWS for developers, or that they're releasing the videos on YouTube, or that they publish that Stack Overflow. I don't think that many things
And
happens by chance.
no.
So I think they're listening. I think they have a keen understanding as well, and they already had a lot of these initiatives in the works. It's just, again, like, you have to be patient with them because they work in a very sensitive space. But see, that's a good thing too, though, because we've got the benefit of 10 years of focus group research they've done with the Department of Defense. So like they have that platform tuned, and in use cases they know work down to a science. Literally, like with DARPA, they were doing focus group research with over 12,000 people on how to use explainable AI in a way that makes sense to the operator. Like, who else has done that? Has Snowflake done that? No, I don't think so.
No,
Right? Has
I'm
Databricks done
aware like Google has done a bit of it, but Google
that? Yeah.
problem is that when they
Google.
do this AI work is they
Yep.
do like always in a B2C context more.
Yep. Exactly. I think
The
Google's the only one that kind of stands up there with the rest of them.
the difference between Google focused research and Palantir focused research, in my opinion, and as I understand, this is a very patchy. You only get information in pieces. Is Google focused research is more on mass market kind of products.
Sure.
Okay.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
like creating incremental value over a very large portion. While Palantir issue is like they want to create a lot of value on selected nodes. So that is what is very different.
I agree with that. I also think just culturally, it's very different. Like, I mean, Alex Karp has publicly called Google a cancer on society. So, like, I don't think they
Yeah.
share the same value system generally when it comes
No,
to
they
AI
don't. I mean,
usage. Yeah, yeah. I think
I
that's an
mean,
overlooked point. Like the future could be really terrifying. Like I was trying to explain it to Jackson. Like, you just take cryptocurrency as an example. Like, let's just say the government, creates its own cryptocurrency and then gets rid of paper money and forces you to use it. you're now in a future where all of your purchases and transactions are recorded and monitored, and AI could do all kinds of terrible shit with that. But that's
Then
just
look
one
at
example. Like what about using it in warfare? You know, like fully autonomous drones that can just go out and straight up murder people, and you don't know where they came from or what they did or self-destruct or whatever. Like that's an actual thing that's happening now. You
I
know?
mean, I know this. Like in India, they
Yeah.
demonetized 99% currency, and like that
Yeah.
forced a lot of people to actually force. I mean, the amount of digital that has been used, it was
Yep.
probably not the way I would have done it, like in a very autocratic way, but that's what they did. But it
But
increased the
there's
digital
massive, what
adoption.
I'm pointing out though is that there's massive misuse potential for what
Yeah.
this future we're going into. And Palantir, in my opinion, is unique in that they understand that deeply. They're, if you look at their corporate structure, like why is it that Stephen Cohen, Alex Karp, and Peter Thiel have these special shares that could eventually
Founders
create
have.
a controlled company? Because they don't want their, in my opinion, it's because they don't want their tech misused on that level. They don't want it sold to Google or something, you know, or like,
No, I think they are very clear on that part. I think this is
yeah.
why a lot of time people say that Microsoft should acquire them, Google should acquire them. I
Oh,
said
hell
no,
no.
that's
Hell
not.
no.
I
It's not that
mean, that's
simple.
not going to happen.
No, it's not going to
So
happen. And even if they did, like I have this sneaky suspicion that they would never give up control. You know, those three people specifically would never give up control over how that
no, I
technology.
think see they have enough money already. I think the
Yeah,
reason
well, yeah. I
they
mean, they're billionaires. You know, so like,
yeah.
who
So
cares?
their Palantir is more what embodies them. So this is one question I get a lot of time, and actually I have very my own peculiar answer to this. Like, how is Palantir different from C3AI? So my question is always to this first is why these two companies are even compared? Because like before I compared C3AI to Palantir, first I need to compare C3AI to its peers which are working in that AI layer and AI stack.
Yeah,
And this is my view on C3AI. See, it's a niche product. It's a clean product. Okay, but it gets more marketing and more coverage because of their PR and marketing rather than the product is good itself. It does. I mean, a lot of AI products are very good nowadays. Okay, for basic things you do, for mediums, like they can do a lot of 80% things. But if you take like big OS, in my opinion, has several layers. Okay, you have the infrastructure layers. Okay, infrastructure layers in a lot of organization is getting complicated now because people want to go for this multi-cloud strategy, and this is where role of Palantir, Snowflake, Databricks is getting even more interesting because with
yep,
this you can actually control this multi-cloud infrastructure. Then you have a lot of legacy and core platforms which is already existing. Then you have all the data layers, everything you have in terms of whatever, in terms of data analytics repository. Then you have all the business layers and SaaS that comes on top of it, your
yep,
microservices, your developer interface, your analytics interface. It has to come on side. You also need the API management, you also need all the CI/CD, you also need cyber
oh yeah,
security. So when you put all these things together, I said, now you are asking me to take. I'm having this 9 big layers which have a lot of small bricks, and you pick one brick, that is C3 AI is in that brick. So
yeah,
C3 AI needs a whole ecosystem of companies to exist before it can even go to client.
yep,
And in the category it
100%.
is going to the client, it has plenty of solutions. I mean, you can use Spark Cognition, you can use, I mean, Data IQ. I mean,
Yep,
I'm actually very surprised. I mean, my view, Data IQ is a far better solution when I look that versus C3 AI.
yep.
Okay, but of course, it's not that popular. I mean, at least in terms of the marketing and PR. But if you, the way I see is like I see what problems they are solving, how fast they are solving, how easily it can be integrated. Okay, and what is the quality of the patents they have. I mean, if you start looking at the C3 AI patents and you are used to of seeing tech patents, yeah, you will just swirl your wheel on the mouse once and your Excel sheet is ended.
Well, like, let me give you my thoughts. I think you did a fantastic job of breaking down the fact that they're just one piece, then they need to be integrated into a broader ecosystem to do anything, you know? So I think that's totally correct. I would distill it down even simpler to a formula. Like, I didn't evaluate their product because I did one thing. I looked at who runs the company, right? The guy that's the CEO has spent his life pumping out software that has net promoter scores that are negative, right? Like, no one likes to use that shit. And in the context of this revolution that's happening right now, like it's vaporware in my opinion, you know. But like that doesn't mean they're not going to be successful, by the way. Like the best software doesn't always win. There's a reason Siebel's like a freaking gazillionaire, you know?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's the best. It just matters whether people want to use it, you know? So I wouldn't underestimate C3 AI. They could totally capture a huge portion of the market. It's just, you know, it's silly to me because like it's not even worth if you're talking the quality of the tech, I wouldn't even have a conversation about that. I'd just be like, let's talk about something else. It's not worth it. You know?
I agree. My view is like that this market and this macro is so strong at this particular point that a lot of companies will grow. Actually, every
Yeah.
Tom, Dick, Harry company will grow for the time being and right now we are far from ceiling. So just because a company is growing at this particular point is not a testament that it is the best tech. I mean, tech wars on this portion is still to come. We are still people trying to understand, even companies trying to understand what they are doing, how they
Yep.
want to serve their customers. So that is something that will be very interesting. So I have this question now, and I think this is one of the most important question to me as well, because and you also covered it, that it is the okay. Let me explain you my versions of future, because I think then probably you will be relating it. So here so I was in this, I was running the digital strategy, and I have to present like the board, like okay, what the future will look like. So I presented them these three views of future. I said there is one view of future is that today we are doing a lot of this ML AI work and we create this nice dashboard. I said, question is, why do you even need dashboard? You need dashboard because it gives you the cursory insight in all the data you have to make some sense of chaos. And why you need that? Because you have to make some decision and you need to make an action. So what is this? At the end of the day, it is mean to take an action to end. So if somebody is taking that action on behalf of you, or somebody tells you that you don't need to look this dashboard, but these are the five decisions you need to take, and these are the trade-offs on the decision, do you really need dashboard? And I said that's the world of operationalized enterprise AI.
Yep.
Okay, that you get a message on phone or your wristwatch and you say, okay, I'll take option A and end of story. You trust the tech in the back and everything is okay. So the second world of future I see is that, see, if we are going to see that human element is going to be so important in all the data analysis and data analytics, see, the fact is the world doesn't have that many human to
Yep.
fill this. So what will happen is eventually there will be a surge in tools which can enable normal tech person like me, who come from an
Exactly.
engineering or science background, but he gets enough tool that he can do 80 to 90% of his data analytics and data science works by itself. So I think that
Yep.
is another version of the. As the third version is that at the end of the day, that you will kind of in a hybrid model where you say that okay, I make the model, but then somebody like what we say like data robot or like automated ML, that they take over the model and they keep updating. I said
Yep.
there are like different versions of world, and probably for a long time they should coexist together because we don't
Yep.
know what will work in a larger system. So
Yep.
having that in mind, like you mentioned, 2017, 2018 was that inflection point where people were starting and collecting a lot of data. And just for the
Yep.
sake of audience, I want to make sure that people used to collect data before, but since
Yep.
they cannot handle data, they used to aggregate into a larger unit before it
Yep.
makes sense. But when the 2017, 18, when they were collecting this data, it was all raw. And that is where the challenge came that particular time, because before people were aggregating and now suddenly they have to deal with all the raw data, and
Yep.
the traditional methods actually failed to make sense of this data. And that's pretty much where we say that
Oh, that's totally
deep
true. That's a
learning
key
and
insight. Yep.
yeah, that's
Yep.
the machine learning. That's the starting of machine learning, because people said that okay, there is a science, and I don't know the science behind it. I don't have time to go into this. So let me try to reverse engineering it back to me. Try to learn it via pattern recognition. And I mean, at the
Yep.
end of the day, if you see, like a lot of these things have the same. I mean, what I was using in neural net in early 2000. I mean, when I see the ML, I think the roots are still there in terms of there. So in that particular aspect, I think we are in a very early onset of still seeing the results of AI and ML.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even gotten there. I think one, your analysis is really good. And I think you had a key insight in there, which is like in 2017, 2018, people are like, what the hell am I supposed to do with all this data? I'm just like, I can't make sense of this. And a human-centric approach isn't going to work. You know, like what we want to do finger in the air science by looking at a dashboard of all this data. You know, like you're just looking at these huge global features. That's not going to tell you anything. You're just this giant blunt instrument on bigger amounts of data does not yield a better result. You know, you're still going to bash yourself in the face. And so, like, I think that you have that totally correct. I think that the future is starting to emerge, which is that there will be companies that specialize in particular applications of ML and AI. Like just yesterday, I looked at a company that has a math whiteboard application, and I can speculate as to some of the ML that they've incorporated into this. But you can do handwritten, algebra, and it will like automatically graph it for you and animate it for you and do all this crazy stuff. And my daughter was playing with it and was like, "Oh my god!" But that's a group of researchers. There's like 6 researchers that built that over the period of like 5 or 6 years. But that's the kind of focused research that yields something of value. Okay, and like I think that can't be done by like Chevron and Exxon can't be the math and science research center for kids whiteboarding applications, but like you
No.
kind of have to have focused companies of focused subject matter experts that do the science, and then let that be democratized out to everyone else and figure out how to use it, and like that's why investing in like, oh, I've got this bitchin' model, and I own all this data. It's like, great. Well, you probably own a slice of the data that can fuzzy answer some questions. But then there's going to be people over here that produce these really fine-grained, unique models that solve real use cases in the high 90s. And your shitty model over here that's like 88% accurate, that doesn't deliver any value because that long tail of problems matters, isn't going to be useful in that future. So like, I think that people have just got it wrong. That the data is valuable if you can take a base model that's been trained by experts and you can put that in an ensemble to help surface signal data and take action, right? And no one company is going to build all of those models. It's really a function of combining the best, and also count the number of PhDs you have, because if you can count them on one hand, you're screwed.
I agree, totally agree on that part. I mean,
Yeah.
this is people forget it's technology, it's fucking rocket science. You need real people on it. See,
So it's like,
the question on the dashboard. Let me take my view. So, see, there was a time when getting data was difficult. Like for example, if you go even before internet, you need to read a book. You will sometime ask your friend. He say, "I give you this book. You give me this book." So there was a time when data was very difficult to find, and that time data had value. That means you get the data, you make some brief insights out of it. But nowadays world is flooded with data. Okay, now the question is what to do with data. So moving forward, in my view, is the companies that can extract value out of data, whether it's their data or somebody else, and they can package it in a way that it either serves customer, industry, government, create value for them, and they charge for it. So my way of looking at it is that owning data, like the B2C and the social media has created these juggernauts. It's not the way the future will look like. The future the future has more value for the companies. See, if you own your data, even it's useless for you. So I have a lot of data that can give me a lot of insights, but my tools of extracting information of the data sucks. So it's useless for me. So you need the data, but you better need the tools, because if you don't if you have tools and you don't have data, yeah, you can get data. Like for example, if you take the case of Viso, what Viso is doing, Viso is collecting this data. Okay, Palantir is enabling the AI ML on top of it, and anybody can buy. I mean, that's pretty much the world will look like.
No, and it's really like, how do I put this? There are companies that will have the right data too, right? So there are companies that will have the right data to answer real questions. Like remember I was saying before, like a lot of business owners want to ask the wrong questions of the data, and that's and often as an ML AI researcher in an enterprise, you're like going, well, what can I spend my days doing? Because this data is dog shit and we can't really do anything with it. It's like there's 3 use cases and they're already solved over here by this model I just trained, and I could either quit my job now or like spend the next 10 years producing models that aren't going to do anything. So there are going to be like specific companies in a space that have access to high quality data that is also useful for solving real problems. And those models, I 100% believe are going to be completely democratized. Like the models are going to be plug and play software. You can tune them, using a base model and tuning it on your data set. Transfer learning is really common today. Like that's one of the best, actually the thing that's probably delivering the most value is transfer learning right now. So I think that because it can deliver value also in a short amount of time. So I think that's really where we're going to wind up. And it's not really the models that are hard to build either. Like 80% of the time is spent in this ML ops and data preparation layer, you know, like maybe 10% of the time is science.
I
Maybe.
agree. Totally
You
agree.
know?
I mean, and this is so true. I mean, even
Yeah.
like 15 years back, this data loading, data cleaning, and one of the biggest regret of my life is like when I moved from Unix to Windows. Okay,
Yep. Yep.
when Windows workstation became a thing, man, you missed all these parsing tools and scripting and all that you were used because
Yep.
Windows. I mean, it sucks. I mean, of course, over the time, all the VI editor and everything has been brought to Windows, but man, it sucked.
Yeah.
It's
Just to focus in on real quick to follow back on that question with Tesla and the data and all that stuff, like the model that the reason like people in the analyst space were like, super pumped on owning your own data is the ways in which it's been monetized in the past, which is really to drive engagement, which drives advertising revenue. Like that was the killer app for big data in the past. I actually believe that data is going to be that model is going to be regulated out of existence as people wake up to the fact that those produce negative consequences for society. Like Jonathan
yeah,
Haidt is an American researcher. It's pointed to the effects of social media, especially in young girls. Rates of self-harm and suicidality are going off the charts, and it's directly linked to the use of social media and these platforms. That business model is going to fucking die. So like, you don't want the data, you don't need the data. Get out of that business while you can, especially when we're talking about consumer data and profiles and engagement and advertising. That's my belief. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that model is going to die. And so, and people are all worried about cryptocurrency being regulated out of existence. I'd be more worried about Google and Facebook being regulated out of existence.
I agree. The way I see the world is, I see the way the world is now, the Silicon Valley versus Austin. Silicon
Yep.
Valley has their own guards.
Yeah,
You don't
that's
anybody
true.
to enter in, and that is why people are building these places in Colorado and Austin, that they see that okay, we need a different kind of model. So if we stay
Exactly.
within that ecosystem very strongly linked, we will not be able to do it. So they are trying to create a new sources of advantage for them. So
I
in
agree.
short, I mean, I think we both agree in a way that the world, the data was had its important, but I think moving forward, the companies which can extract value out of data and serve it as a premium in a business model, I think they will have more valuation or more utility going forward.
Well, here, this will blow your
I
mind.
think,
Like, think about a world where, and you see this emerging with Snowflake and Databricks and Foundry right now, which is consortiums, right? So like data sharing without replication, and how do we do science on encrypted data with like homomorphic encryption, right? So like, I don't know if you know what homomorphic encryption is, but
I
like,
know, I know,
okay, so like, but like,
I
this is an emerging technology that's almost ready, not quite ready, but it's getting there. That would really allow those sharing use cases, in my opinion, to skyrocket. Where like, oh, I can do science on an encrypted form of data that has an encryption context around it, so the values are useless outside of this session that I'm doing. All of a sudden, like what you can do in the life science space is going to blow up. Like we're still kind of in this clunky space where we're trying to do that, and we're kind of there, but when it's democratized out, you won't need as many of the controls around that system, and you can do like a truly decentralized model. And if we look towards the future of like what that might mean for the consumer space, like think about building a profile that you hold in a crypto wallet that has all your personal information, your transcripts from university, your medical profile, your financials, but you can exchange it in an encrypted form, right? So like say I want to apply for a loan, and I can get a credit score based off the data that's in the app, and that's all done on blockchain, right? And you use homomorphic encryption to pass it through models to validate your credit score. Like that means all these people who spent all this time like trying to centralize all that data are going to be fucked. It's like, I think that there is this future that one, blockchain is going to play a big role in, and two, technologies like homomorphic encryption are going to play a huge role in. That's going to fundamentally disaggregate all these data silos we've got today. And I think that Palantir knows it, right? I'm purposefully using the language that Carp has used because I think they know
yeah.
this future is coming. So like I think that is also something people need to wake up to, is that the future is decentralized, the future of data is decentralized, and the only company that knows it is Palantir. So, in my opinion,
I think just for everyone to, I mean, let me just try to take us crack on to simplify, like if people can understand what is homomorphic
yep,
encryption. Like, see, think about this, guys. I mean, like, so for some of the earliest paper I read on homomorphic deconvolution, where it started was of 1960s, And this is how I understood it in my early
Yep.
days. So like my work was more in earth science, and earth science you get data which is not encrypted, but it has so many effects of so many unknown sources that you have to actually find information out of it. So think about this guy, like you have a signal which is A and it is mixed with something B, and it's, you don't know, I mean, it's multiplicative in nature, and you want to do run something on this. In a homomorphic decon, what you will do, like with something very simple in the early stage, you say, okay, why don't I go in the log domain? In the log domain, you have a log A and log B. Now you know the signal part. So what you are trying to do is you're trying to go in a domain using mathematical function where you can actually see the portion of data, or the algorithm or the ML can see that portion of data, while everything around you don't see it. They solve it, they kind of merge it back and anti-log, whichever way you are looking at it, and then it presents you that encrypted version out of it, that information. So this is how the information is kind of secured from direct access point of view, yet you still get information out of it.
Yep. But it's also really expensive to compute, and
It is.
and it has, so yeah, we're almost there. We're getting closer. Microsoft Seal is a pretty, if there are any engineers listening, check out Microsoft Seal. That's a pretty approachable implementation, and you can start thinking about use cases. But I believe that's the future. I love this question here, by the way. I would love a crack at it. So yeah, you're right. Like all of the immediate use cases, especially in the anomaly detection space, where I think Foundry has like a really big leg up personally. Palantir has been in the anomaly detection, fraud detection space for a long time. So like a lot of those use cases are complex, and they're like applicable for NASA, and they're applicable for oil rigs, and they're applicable for like these really large high stakes industries, but they're not applicable for like someone running a call center maybe, but remember this future we're talking about where models are democratized. Well, how do you operationalize those models with Salesforce, for example? So let's say I've got a upsell model that was developed by this specialist company over here that aggregated call center data from everyone, right? And they have also aggregated it with like LinkedIn profiles, and they've built models that can essentially try and build a profile, like run it through a knowledge graph of the call of the person you're like on a call with, along with these other models that are maybe NLP models or other types of models that are going to try and upsell or gauge where you should take the customer. But how do you get that integrated into your call center? Foundry, right? Foundry will implement that into your call center. So like there is a future coming in which these democratized models, no, the call center company will not be in the big data business, but they certainly will be in using ML to improve outcomes in their, sales calls. But you still need to operationalize that somehow, and it's not going to be Salesforce operationalizing it. I think it's going to be Foundry. And the reason is that the deployment targets are bigger than just your call center,
So tell me one thing. I think if you're aware of this, then that means you're already looking at the call centers and sales channels. They're not only looking at what the information is discussed, they detect tone of information, whether
Yeah,
somebody
exactly.
is okay. They try to understand like the stress level. I mean, they're not only doing just like information. Now they are doing much more, which cannot be done, and they're trying to identify the context in which person is speaking, how many times he calls you, what other sources of data.
Yep.
They try to match like who has spoken in a different same kind of word, same part of town, and try to match what kind of outcome. So
Yep.
they're trying to actually improve the user experience out of these, how to say, like the subtle things that the data captures.
Exactly. And that's a huge space. And then, I mean, there's also like chatbots and stuff that are going to be emerging. But yeah, I think Foundry should be the platform that enables that. And again, this is speculative, so I'm not like speaking on behalf of Palantir. This is me speculating about the use cases there. And as far as like what's the smallest company that can use it today? Well, my company's pretty small and we can use it. We're like 400 people, so there are plenty of businesses that are small that can leverage Foundry, if for nothing else, to operationalize ML. So
I think it's not the size of company that determines. It's actually the complexity and the approach to time to value. Because see, at the end of the day, if you can create enough value when the small people, that matters more.
agreed.
So
Cool.
let me crack on this one. I mean, like, see, so the orgs Skywise result. So see, I had a chat with some of the people, okay, in both companies, and I try to gauge like what the value of Skywise has created. And it has been covered by many people like Skywise value, but one thing
Yep.
which I need to learn is that Skywise, it's been valued at 18 billion, just a solution like the digital stack, the digital
yeah.
platform itself. Okay, so the thing is like So think about me, like I come from oil and gas industry or energy industry, which is transitioning to renewable. And you have seen how the stocks have performed, how the valuation of companies have gone. I mean, giants like Exxon, Chevron has been replaced by Google and Microsoft.
Yep.
Don't you think these companies would see a scenario where their data can create a $10 billion value for them? And so this is what the networking effect will look like. I mean, like they sits on tons of data, guys. You do not remember that, realize that when you talk about, like, in terms of basic physics research that goes in
Yep.
a lot of these energy companies, for example, in terms of your wave equations, your diffusion equations. I
Yep.
mean, because that's what it is. I mean, they had some of the best minds of the time when they were at the peak.
Yep.
So they are studying a lot of information. They have acquired a lot of data, and when they start making sense of this data and turning into product of 4 billion, 5 billion valuation, a lot. So
Right.
yes, I mean, Skywise, so, and you see the case of Centropy, which is Merck. Merck is sitting on tons of data on the research on cancer, and they said we are not making sense of it. At least the pace we are working, we want to make it faster, better, more efficient, and consistent. And this is where Palantir came in, and Palantir and Merck together now forming Centropy. And there are a lot of solutions like this is appearing. See, at the end of the day, in my opinion, what matters is that when somebody cracks the code in an industry working with Foundry or other solution, it kind of forces everybody's hand to do something similar,
Yeah,
because
totally.
companies start
Totally.
asking to them. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's sort of the angle I've been pitching, which is like, how do you plan to compete with Palantir's customers? You know, like like, remember that 87% failure rate? Like, that's not going away. That's staying there. Like like, how are you as a company going to compete with this other group of customers, people over here that you need to compete against, and they're not having an 87% failure rate; they're having a 90% success rate, right? So, like, yes, there's going to be this effect. I think that it's going to largely be driven by the winners. Like, how do you compete against the winners who actually are using ML and AI correctly and have found a way to make it, like, to actually deliver business value where, like, everyone else is failing? And that's where Kathy Wood, I think, is at some really neat insights in that it's a winner take most world. She's not wrong, dude. Like,
I
it's going to
agree.
be a winner take most world. And like Karp's saying, it's not like, this future with AI and ML where, like, one side has a hammer and the other side has a gun or something. It's like, no, it's going to be like one side has like a hammer and the other side has an atomic bomb, like that's going to
Yeah.
be the difference, and so to answer your question, a lot of people are going to go out of business as a result of what happens. And I think that the companies that build the operational efficiencies on top of this are going to win.
No, I agree. And I'm glad you said that a lot of people will go out of business, because this is what people don't consider.
Yeah.
See, it's very simple things. Like, for example, when you implement, like, say, a company commits net zero, okay?
Yep.
And then that happens, they start breaking down every activity they do, and they try to see the carbon footprint of every activity. They will realize that there are few activities which are no longer economical because
Yep.
of their carbon footprint. So
Yep.
activities and business will shape a lot of things that is happening around us. Like, now we are trying to bring supply chain back. We wanted to reduce inventory. So I mean, it's not like this. You're bringing supply chain back. You want to bring
Yep.
supply chain back. So that means you want to be more flexible on inventory, because you can do manufacturing back at home. So how
Yep.
you source your material, what's your channels, sales channels will look like. Everything around will that change as well.
Dude, like, never let a crisis go to waste, in the sense that what I
Ah,
mean by that is that crisis is going to shape, like, it's an accelerant for who goes out of business, like, so when we have a supply chain crisis, like, how many companies have gone out of business as a result of the supply chain collapsing, and, like, Palantir's customers will just find advantages there. They're actually going to accelerate. They're going to win, they're going to take those crises and turn it into, like, unparalleled revenue growth, because they're going to put their competition out of business. What happens when there's a war, right? Like, what if we go to war tomorrow, China invades Taiwan, and we have to cut off all economic activity with China? You cannot source your parts from China anymore, like, what does that mean for companies? Like, how do they do that? Like, there's a lot of complexity baked into this thing. And so I think that, in a perfect world, eventually these people put out of business 20 years from now, 30 years from now. In an imperfect world where there's crisis and war and conflict and all this other shit that's coming down the pipe, like, that might accelerate into a 5-year time horizon. So
that is true.
businesses better be thinking about this and thinking right quick, because the world, this lovely little stable situation we had, is quickly devolving, and I think it should be letting CE, and you're seeing it in markets, right? Like just take a let's take a trivial version of this. I'm a startup. I have goals. My board of directors tells me 100% revenue growth year over year. In perfect market conditions, that's hard. Now let's imagine there's conflict and there's inflation and there's all this crappy economic stuff that's coming down the pipe. You better figure out a way to still deliver that value you promised, right? For using AI and ML, but now in a much more high stakes game, right? So it's like the pressure on just the money funnel is going to get immense. And so like, I think companies who are thinking they're going to do all this stuff themselves, they better realize their budgets are going to get cut in half real soon. So it's like, there's that too.
I agree. The way I see the situation now, see in last 30, 40 years, what happened, like what we call like this peace bubble, corporate and politics has become like quite nexus to each other, including media houses. They have manipulated the world and they managed to avert like at least the confrontation crisis a lot of time. They started believing that it will not happen. It will happen at some point of time, and a lot of people will be captured their pants down. Okay, I mean,
Exactly.
they will be challenged to that. So let me take this question now. I mean, like, and let me take a crack on this. So see, this whole idea of owning the data, na, it comes from social media, that you own the data because you need to sell the data. See, at the end of the day, people are not in the business of owning the data. At the end of the day, people are actually making insights and making money of it. So, for example, if you have a Word document on your laptop, does Microsoft have access to it? No. So same thing, if you deploy Foundry in your closed system and you are using it for your data, does Palantir have access to it? No. If you want Palantir to have access to it, you want to have it on Palantir Cloud and you want Palantir to regularly monitor few things of it, it is your prerogative. You want to give access to Palantir or not. But Palantir cannot access your data. Palantir software stack can run on your data as you would like it to. Palantir has no access. Like, it's not like Google. I search something and then suddenly I start seeing popping ads around it. Okay, so they have access to my search data. But in this particular case, the answer is no. And the question is like, why B2C models sell the data? Because you will not pay for every search you are doing. So they use that information to extract value out of it so that they can offer you a service. In the case of Palantir, clients are paying money, so they don't mind. I mean, they don't want access to the data. So it's a very different kind of a setup. Okay, it's more beneficial because people who can create value, they'll have to pay premium.
Yeah, I think you got all of that right. I would also add to that we're actively jumping through hoops to make sure Amazon doesn't have access to our data. Like we opt out of services that Amazon uses, where Amazon uses our data. Like we're not allowed to use them. So this idea that the company, like Palantir, let me just distill it down into a statement. Palantir doesn't need the data and they don't want the data. So like that's just like, let's level set on the reasons why. And it's because companies don't want cloud providers or anyone else using their data, number one, and they actively work to silo it from them. So there's that. And like you pointed out, they, in 90% of cases, they can't even use it anyway. So like, who cares? And then the only reason people thought data was valuable was because of the way Google and Facebook monetized it. But that shit is going by the wayside. Like that has hugely negative consequences for society when you start building models that can manipulate people the way they have. So like, not good. So like, get out of that business while you can. I think Palantir just knew from the beginning, like, that's not a sustainable business model, and it's a cancer on society. So we're going to move in a different direction. That's
I agree. And a lot of time people tell me about the excess of data. They say Palantir mines your data. And these are the people who use two fingers to type. I said, dude, I mean, you need to first get the basic understanding at times, because like a lot of time I hear this part from the Wall Street also. And they say, okay, this is a company that secretly mines your data. I said, nobody is secretly mining your data. If you want to pick 2 or 3 companies that secretly mine your data, it is Facebook, Google, and Amazon. There is no one else.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that a lot of that was just Wall Street analysts, again, fucking analysts. Like, I have nothing against analysts. Analysts do us a valuable service. It's just they stick their foot in their mouth in areas where they shouldn't talk, and like projecting onto the scene, inventing business models out of whole cloth. Like, that's just fucking stupid, guys. Like, let the technical experts deal with these kind of questions. You guys just crunch the numbers and look at the business model, but like, I think that's where all this confusion gets thrown in there, and they do it over and over again. It just drives me nuts. But I think that, like, just look at the value they deliver, look at the bottom line, like, focus on those things.
That makes sense. So, what do you think of the Palantir engineers' quality? I think this is always a debate that, and I understand. Like, I was listening Peter Thiel once long back. Actually, I think it was 2007, and Peter Thiel was mentioning this that they came because they were struggling to get the best people to for Palantir, because there's Google, there's Facebook, there's Amazon, but you want the best people. So this high compensation SPC came in. But at the end of the day, what do you think of the quality of engineers, the core of Palantir? Do you think they are really handful of elite people?
Let me try and answer this question from, like, let's start with what makes good engineers first of all. I'm a firm believer that no software engineer from any university can deliver any kind of value in their first year of being hired, right? So, like, I don't care where you went to school, I don't care how fucking genius you are. I mean, maybe there are some people who are just that smart, but, like, the vast majority of people, even if you're coming out of elite school, don't know how to build software. Like, they're just completely green, and you have to teach them how to build software. It's one thing when you're building a project in which you're the sole contributor. It's very different when you have 300 other contributors on the same project, and also, like, getting on the same page on just, like, how you do quality checks, and how you do pull request review, and how you actually, like, implement common design patterns within an ecosystem of development. Like, these are all hard questions. So, like, good engineers aren't hired, they're made. Okay, so, like, just figure that out. That's, like, the baseline. But then you layer on top of it, one, Palantir has operationalized software development to the scale that only Google really has. Like, their achievements are on par with Google, in my opinion, in terms of how they've operationalized it, from their monorepo setup to their Git machinery to their online IDEs, their ability to review and manage change at scale, unparalleled except for Google. But then you throw on top of it, this is a company that actively gets their engineers into crisis zones. There's a crisis, the engineers are going to the place, right? Like who the fuck does that? Like, what engineer picks up their laptop and jumps into a crisis zone to go tackle a challenge? Like, that's the kind of culture Palantir has created. I would bet fucking money any one of their engineers could solve a problem faster than anyone else. If you give them a problem that's worth solving, and they'll solve it better than anyone else, because they're used to crisis. They know how to work in that environment. They have I think Robert Fink. Am I getting his name right? Guys in the chat will probably know that he runs Helsing AI. He's the CTO at Helsing AI. He put out a great article recently about talking about, like, how to prioritize crisis, and, like, what are the priority levels of things. These are, like, the kind of things that come out of a culture like that, like people who can really distill down really hard things and think about them deeply, reflect on them, and then implement things that affect the real world in a positive way. And, like, so yeah, in my opinion, they've got the best engineers because they made the best engineers, and they continue to make the best engineers. And they've done it because they raised them in an environment built on needing massive amounts of trust, collaboration, and handling crisis. So, like, yeah, that's how I would answer
Like,
that.
I think culture is something now which is very underestimated in tech sector. People say culture means having golf table around PS5, having LGBTQ. See, all these are part of life. Okay, you don't have to be in a tech company to actually support these movements. A person running even a pop and mom shop can support everything as long as he believes in it. The culture is something that drives you to do a better version of yourself. It
Yep.
allows you to see, if I can get along with someone and I'm doing every time everything with them, this is not culture. This is just my equation with that person. This is chemistry.
Yep.
Culture is where people from different and varying opinion, diversity are forced to work under very challenging times sometime, and they outdone themselves. That's
Yep.
what I would call a winning combination. And that, when I mean, I've seen, like, cases I have seen in Palantir. And there are other companies also. I'm not saying Palantir is the only company, but Palantir has done it, in my opinion, more consistently and more often than a lot of other companies I'm seeing nowadays.
Yep. Agree. Yeah, they just have built this amazing culture, and they continue to crank out, like, amazing software engineers. So yeah, and I think they're kind of unstoppable in that area. It's really hard to get hired there too. Like, if you talk to, I've talked to a lot of people who've tried to get hired there, and they're really selective. It's not a purely technical thing too. Like, they're looking for a type of person that can handle the way they're going to raise you up, in the kind of environments you're going to be in. I think they have a really good sorting mechanism, and their hiring pipelines are good. And so yeah, they've nailed it, man.
Nice. Okay. So I think the Chris is asking, and Chris is a close friend actually.
Yep, I
We
know
were
Chris.
on the chat
Yep,
this morning. So Chris saying that, I mean, this is true that Snowflake is just a columnar data database. The way it started, I think there
it
were
is.
three sources. It's a columnar database, and that's what I said. They use SQL, and
Yep,
99% people those days can relate to SQL. I think one thing which also Snowflake did very good, and I'm a big fan of Snowflake for this is, man, this is a company, their ethics of working with their partners, their clients, man, they are super fun.
yep,
They are so cool to work with, because see, if you see on paper and you want to see, okay, this is a SageMaker, this is BigQuery, this is Snowflake. I
yep,
mean, paper you will see the difference is not that much. The moment you put it in a real situation,
yep.
that time you realize of, if I am working with AWS SageMaker, I need 5 site reliability engineers to work with. And if you're
At
working
least,
with
yeah,
Flake, and you say, okay, I mean, I can train my people. People don't appreciate that how important it is that when you remove the dependency, yes, it can do a lot of things, but at what cost? What
yeah,
optionality and what flexibility?
yep,
So, so Snowflake has done, like, I mean, the solution is simple. They made it very clear in terms of their clean cut between compute and storage. That was pretty niche the way they came up it. And then, yeah, I mean, their ethics. So they put these 4 or 5 things together, and this is how their magic sauce is built. Is
yep.
my impression right?
And they throw good parties. So I think that's the key.
That's always a good.
So like, yeah, they have good swag. They throw good parties. You know, I think that's huge. But this is in seriousness though. Like if I were to take Snowflake and Databricks, they're both like expanding their product offerings, but Databricks is more intentional than Snowflake. Snowflake is like, all right, let's build a lake house. All right, next let's get ML ops in there, guys. Like they're quickly trying to expand, and you can tell like there's not a lot of really good forethought going into the decisions they're making, and then they're halfway selling ideas like cross cloud, and they're just sprinting, you know, like, and they're eventually going to trip, and they're starting to trip, and that's not to talk shit on their tech. They have good tech, but it's largely undifferentiated. I mean, the core technology is like, you know, 30 years old or something, or I forget how old it is, but we've basically known like the right architecture for a columnar database for 20 years. And so like there's nothing groundbreaking there. The groundbreakingness was like in their cloud architecture, their hybrid architecture, and their SQL engine.
That I think that is, and if you see their recent patents are also coming there.
Yep.
You know, one thing I have to mention, because we cannot discuss the data cloud without mentioning Oracle and how
Yeah.
big, how mess they have fucked up in last. I mean, they are like the god of data. And I remember, like, I was listening to their CEO like 3 years back, and he was like this
Yep.
sitting, and he was saying that we have the best solutions, and
Yep.
client will go and client will mess up around AWS, and at the end of that, everybody will come to us. Man, that was arrogant. That was very arrogant, I felt.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now what is happening? I mean, of course, AWS made their own provision, Google made their own provision.
Yep.
This is, see, Oracle expertise on data is unmatched. There is no doubt about it.
Agreed. I would
I
agree with
mean,
that.
their patents, their technologies, their
Yep.
contribution. But as legendary as their data prowess is, as similar in the same respect, I think the arrogance they carried in the cloud business was equally big. Also, they failed to serve customers, and the companies that fail in a way. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad business or they're not making money. I mean, they are quite cash rich, healthy, but I think they have left a lot of opportunity on the table.
You know, that's where your business model can fuck up your technical shit, because like what happens is you create a walled garden, right? You know, and you're king of that walled garden, right? And you're making gazillions of dollars, but then some asshole over here is going to plant a new garden, you know, and it's going to be largely open source, like Facebook with Presto, and like all these in the release in the Apache Foundation and Cassandra and all these other open source tools that are popping up, sprouting up. And you're like, let's not worry about that. It's all good. And then one day you wake up in that garden, you can see it over your wall, you know, and you're like, and that's where like a business model that excludes, like, it doesn't take into account the power of developer communities and what they can do to you, you know. And I think that like what happened to them was that all this other technology grew up around them, and they didn't want to get out of the garden, you know. They're just going to stay in that little walled sphere. And they're making billions. I mean, dude, I can't knock them for that, but like that's the death of a lot of companies eventually, you know. So
See that they remind me of the Microsoft of the 2002 to 2010. I
yep,
mean, Microsoft was making a lot of cash from their Windows and from their Office, but they were
yep,
making a lot of. I mean, every bet they were making was off. That's what it is called, that the lost decade
yep,
under the Steve Ballmer. So to me, like Oracle is like they're doing good business. They're making a lot of money.
yep,
They're
yep.
earning good cash, but they failed the opportunity to become the same legend what Google and Microsoft is today.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. I know that, everyone wants to get in the cloud game now too. I mean, like Oracle's got a cloud, IBM's got a cloud. Like everyone's coming up with these clouds, but like the infrastructure is out. Like, what they're failing to realize is that eventually the only value in the cloud, in my opinion, is going to be the infrastructure that's under it, and all these services and all the software layer, like that's going to be delivered by like specialty companies that just deal with one aspect of that. Like a good example of that is like Auth0 or MongoDB or the serverless cloud. Like there's all these specialist people who are going to deal with one aspect. They're going to build one service and they're going to build it well. And they're going to really solve a use case, and they're going to abstract away the cloud provider. You want to be on some cloud over here? Go for it. DigitalOcean's or whatever you want to be on. That'll just be like selections in a dropdown or something when you launch this stack, And where companies are failing is they're like Amazon with 200 plus services, and they're run by teams of 5 people, and they really deliver value around the margins. Like you said, you need 5 like SMEs to come in and implement that thing to deliver any value for your business. That's not a good business model, So I think you're going to see bigger disruptions even in the cloud space. Like Oracle's a good example of how maybe they missed the boat, but at the same time, that boat may change directions, So like it
Oh yeah.
won't be super valuable that you have like a million services. Maybe you just have one, and it's really good at doing something, And the infrastructure that it runs on is meaningless. Like you can choose all the clouds, all the clouds. I want to be on all the clouds, right? Like that is, I think that's what's going to end up happening. So I could see Oracle making a comeback where they solve like a really big like one of the biggest problems we have in just decentralized applications right now is distributed data. If someone can really crack that nut, they're going to make gazillions of dollars. So I think that's maybe a space that could emerge where they could play,
Yeah, I like the idea you mentioned. Like, if somebody can do one problem and one solution, or one
Yep.
stack for one solution at a time, especially when we see the deployment of edge solutions now, if
Yep.
that is much, because the bandwidth is also increasing at the edge. I mean that could be quite something.
Yep. Well, let's take
Nice.
this question here. I'll take a shot at this one. And remember, I'm
Sure.
not speaking for Palantir. Uh, I'm assuming that like when they form these partnerships with like Hyundai Heavy Industries, and they're going to go out across a whole range of businesses to take advantage of what they're building. Yeah, I think there's IP agreements in there for sure. Like everything that I've been a part of where like we were doing similar things, there was always IP agreements and like who gets what, So yeah, there's probably IP agreements in there. And regardless if there's an IP agreement or not, software companies retain the right to all their intellectual property typically when you hire them. So like if I go in and I hire Google to solve a problem, it's not going to be a typical work for hire agreement. Google's going to tell you to fuck off. Like, so you don't get a work for hire agreement for these companies. Like they will tell you what the terms of the IP agreement typically is. And if you don't like it, you can go pound sand because they'll go to your competitor and just run it with them. So like I don't think people have a lot of leverage to tell Palantir like what IP they get to keep and not keep. And then the other side to that is that even if they didn't have the models, like 80% of making the model is the feature engineering and the data prep and all that other crap, and all that code's 100% reusable. So like under any scenario, because it's probably pre-existing, So like it's people get, I think, a little too hyper focused on the data and the models when I'm like, dude, I keep telling you guys 80% of the work is in all this other crap unrelated to the actual science. 10% science, like 80% ML ops and data prep, and like 10% other shit, So
I'm glad you mentioned it, because this is also one of the reasons that a lot of people went for build, because people wanted to own the IP, and at the end
yep.
of the day, they ended up working with Accenture rather than companies like Palantir and Google.
That's so nuts. Like, why would you fucking make that decision? Like what is going through your mind? Like, let me just bypass like the 2 companies that actually have experience in this space and deliver value. Let me go with this other high risk, probably low reward value proposition over here. And like, what are you going to do with that IP? Like, what do you even care? Like, are you planning to launch are you going to get into the ML AI software space? I don't understand.
I'll tell you a real life experience. So I was working with this company, and this is pretty large, like 10,000 people, and I was helping them to sort out their digital transformation, digital strategy implementation. So their data team came up with because they wanted to monetize the data, and they showed a value case to me like $8 million. If we do this way, then
Yep.
we create the product for which can generate extra $8 million revenue. And I asked them, I said, this is an energy company. That means if you get a well right, you probably will generate 50 million from that well. I said, when I'm going for your 8 million solution, and if I compromise the quality, and if that quality compromise even 1% of the production of the company, I mean, that is like $90 million. Do you really want me to take care of $8 million? And in order to do this, how much time and resources I need to. So I mean, that was I was
Yep.
trying to explain them, like how the build versus buy works different. I mean, you can
Yep.
create a lot of value cases on PowerPoint and Excel, but you need to understand the ground context also.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's I think CEOs need to they need a base rate, and like they need to understand the base rates of failure, and like then have a model that you just show them, like, here's the projected cost of your failure that you're going to likely have, and that analogy is really good, because it's like, if you succeed, you get this, but if you fail, if you fuck up, and a high likelihood of screwing up, here are all the costs that you're going to have, and like, no one does that. They're all doing best, what do they call it, best case scenario planning. Like, that's every conversation I've sat down with, and people are planning on how they're going to approach these initiatives. They're all best case scenario. Like, no one's bringing up, like, what is the cost
No,
if you fail? It's unreal.
nobody accounts for the variability and the failure.
Yeah.
It's fine. So let's go on this one. I think this is. Let me take on this one. Like with Palantir, existing contracts and commercial. See, my understanding is that as every company's in the B2B space, contracts are always renegotiated. The only thing what changes over the time is that how much they are utilized.
Yep.
And companies, when they have foot inside a client, they actually try to sell more products. They increase their services, but the cost per service over the time starts going down. But it doesn't mean it's a bad business, because once they create the volume, they replace potential customers or potential competition. This is how, I mean, if you see, like all the big techs has become big. I mean, their value of service actually have gone down over the time, but they have created so much volume that overall their revenue per client a lot of times kept on increasing. So this is what I expect Palantir to be on the same track. I mean, of
Yep.
course, it will be a different kind of a trajectory, but overall, that should be the essence of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's how I think about it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we can't account for, the only thing we can't really project or account for right now is like how the relationship develops with them. It's hard to know. Like, there's still like this movement in the government space to build your own. Like, I wouldn't forget about that. Like, and I don't expect it to be this rosy road forward. Like, I think there'll be maybe some contracts lost to people deciding they're going to try and build things themselves, and maybe they're not under the same restrictions as the U.S. government. Like, so U.S. government, I believe, has to consider commercial solutions before they build their own. So like, and that's what that whole court case thing was about. But I do think there'll be some. The government space is not immune to the same problems we face in the commercial space, and we're still on this like 2 to 3 year time horizon where all of those build your own solutions are going to eventually collapse, and suffer the consequence we were just talking about, which is not accounting for, like, what if you fail? What is the cost of that, right? And so, like, I think we can't account for that, and so just keep that in mind. That, like, in my opinion, the growth trajectory in the government space is going to be a rocky road. It's not going to be a straight line, So
No, it
that's
makes
what
sense. Let me take
Yep.
this one. I mean, like, see when I see like Microsoft, Google, and AWS, and I see. So my idea is like these companies are so busy for the time being in their infrastructure work. But at
Yep.
the end of the day, we say that big data is a trillions of dollars of market. So eventually, yeah, these companies will be competing. When that happens, in what sense, how aggressive they came to each other, that is to be seen. But yeah, the war will be on at some point of time.
I think that, yeah, I mean, they're definitely, yeah, you're totally right about that. I think the advantage is like who can show they're delivering value. And I think that Amazon is going to have a lot to answer for as customers fail at huge rates, spending huge amounts of money. And I think it's going to turn a lot of people off to to some of these initiatives generally. And like if Google's already in this space, they have their own competing products that look a lot like Amazon's. I think Google will have a natural advantage in the actual AI. So like Google's AI is probably the best, and they'll be able to integrate that in their offerings the way other people cannot. But Microsoft is a sleeper here. Like Microsoft's research, I don't know if you guys subscribe to Microsoft Research, but you should, because it's like some of the coolest lecture series you can get on what they're doing in the ML AI
No,
research.
I haven't done it. I'll do that.
Yeah, check it out. Like I get a lot of value from subscribing to that channel and like learning how they're approaching problems. IBM too, IBM Research, I subscribe to that a lot. And they've done some really advanced research in natural language processing and like how they do document classification and all these kind of how they build their knowledge graphs. But like Microsoft's a sleeper there for sure. I think people haven't really accounted for what they're going to go to market with. And they are unique in that if they're as good as they look like they're going to be, they have not only cloud, but they've got device, they've got operating system.
They've got devices, they
Yeah.
have HoloLens, they have an entry to metaverse, they have
Yep.
gaming. So they, in my
Yep.
way, that in a metaverse, especially both in industrial and gaming, which is going to be, in my opinion, the first adopter of these
I
technologies for
agree.
AR, VR.
Yep.
Microsoft has, and this is where people actually miss sometimes, like when just people talking like the Facebook in the same extent as Microsoft. And I said,
That's
guys, you
just
need to
crazy.
remember, like we talk Amazon and Facebook in same response because there is something which Wall Street says FANG.
Yep.
You need to understand in last 10 years, Amazon has built a very large B2B market. What is Facebook B2B product? There is none.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think that people have took this definition of FANG and they kind of stuck with it, but they need to also realize that companies within FANG actually have taken different path over the last decade. And
Yep.
Facebook, I mean, it's a cash generating machine, there is no doubt about it, but they do not have B2B sector.
No,
So even like
they're
when
not
they came up
doing
with this whole metaverse thing, I said that the thing with the metaverse is
it.
that
Yep.
why I think Facebook is at a disadvantage. See, they have a social network, I mean, like Instagram and everything, and that will have a role to play in their digital metaverse the way they think. I said the first adopter of metaverse who are actually going to pay
Yep.
are the industries and the gamers because they love
Agreed.
to they can spend money like anything.
And
So if
who's
you
positioned for that, right? Like
yeah, and who's
Microsoft,
position for that?
you know?
Microsoft. So that's
Yeah.
what I said to. In my view, that Microsoft is actually, and when I see like when I talk to my clients, I think in terms of quality, what I understood is people had serious praise for Google Cloud. I mean, they
Yep.
really liked it, but the thing they struggle with Google is more the business model, and Google has a lot of choices. We don't do this, we do this. They are
Yep.
very, very, very stiff. Okay, when I talk about AWS, I think the thing about the AWS is that the aggression and the sales they come up with, like they literally overwhelm you with the, if you give them a call they return it 20 times a day. I mean, they literally overwhelm
Yep.
you with the kind of effort. Okay, why don't you look this, why don't you talk to this
Yep.
customer? And I mean, the thing with the Microsoft I have seen is like Microsoft has taken like this middle road, okay,
Yep.
where they're not that stiff, where, and the thing is like a lot of companies already have Office 365. So Microsoft
Yep.
literally has a presence in a lot of these companies, and they also
Plus,
like
I
a
mean,
lot of
think
industry.
of the growth of Azure. I mean, what else explains the growth of Azure other than they have this alignment with their customer base, right? So like when you have those kind of like network effects on people on your platform, you just launch a cloud and you're automatically going to capture a set percentage of the market. Like, what is that going to mean when they launch the things we're talking about? Like you can just pencil them in. Like just pencil them in for like 30% or 40% because like they have that big of a network. So like, yeah, I mean, people are sleeping on Microsoft. I don't think they realize like just how big this company could get.
That makes sense.
And yeah,
So we are running towards the end. I still have some comments. So my sincere apologies. I may not be taking all of them. Okay, I will try to answer them later. But let me take one or two, which I think is quite important. The one is Apollo.
yeah,
I think Apollo, in my view, is a very misunderstood product. People don't
yes,
understand it. So why?
yes.
Let me take your take on Apollo.
I love Apollo. Like I'm freaking out over this tech. I can't tell you the details, but I got a really deep dive recently and got to talk to some engineers from Palantir about it. That's about all I can say, I guess. But yeah, it's totally a misunderstood product. I was right in how I interpreted it. And I think people are still just not understanding, like, in a world where there's edge AI, you have millions of deployment targets, and it's not just one cloud, it's all the clouds, it's all the edge, it's, Cloudflare, it's CDNs, it's your phones, desktops, everything. How do you manage that with today's CI/CD build systems? The answer is you don't. They collapse, like it's just not a sustainable way to get to the edge. Palantir has been raised in this environment where they need to deploy to the edge, and they need a command and control center that can manage that. And they built Apollo for that future that we're now finding ourselves in. And they built it a long time ago, so they've perfected it in a way that like other companies are going to struggle with. And when I just even explain it to engineers, their minds blow up because they're just melting. Their minds are melting because they can't. They're like, wait, what? Like they're so not thinking this decentralized way. And like I just hosted a roundtable at my company that Palantir attended, and we talked decentralization. What does that mean for the future of software? What does that mean for architectures that we have today? Like, how are they going to change and invert and go through this transformation? And Apollo is like a perfect example of a type of technology that we don't know. We don't really know we need it yet, but we absolutely need it. And it's to manage that deployment out to all those targets. Right now you have, like, in our build system, we have like 4 deployment targets. It's going to be 4 million. So it's just like, how do you deal with that order of a magnitude change? Well, Apollo, that's how you're going to do it. And
so I'll give my answer like in 2 sentences on this one because you explained it all well. So my view is that CI/CD is a space where the next $100 billion companies are going to emerge, because everybody is building the data layer and they're trying the use cases. But once it is done, people will actually start making innovative cases, and only then they start running into the cases that, see, we are using almost like 5,000 components. They needs to be updated. There are patches coming, updates coming. There is a lot of testing has to be done. And this is where the world of CI/CD will actually kick in. People who are working ask what is their pain, and you talk to the people who are doing DevOps, and they will tell you that how fucking painful it is.
Exactly.
And
and there's like,
so,
what's funny is like there's like 4 people in DevOps, and they're like expected to run the whole company, with Terraform. It's like, good luck with that, as we scale out. That's not going to work, people. So yeah, I feel bad for the DevOps folks. They are just.
No, I mean, I agree. This is what I said. Like, this is a sector where I'm heavily going to invest, because my understanding is that DevOps is where the next $100 billion companies or next Snowflake will come. That's how I think about it. I mean, I'll see in the future. I think we are running at the end.
But Apollo is that, Apollo.
That's what I say. Like Apollo is. That's what I said. It's a heavily misunderstood. I mean, sometimes I try to think about it, and I said, when there could be a chance that Apollo become a league on its own. I mean, it's like still under the shadow of Gotham and Foundry, but when I see my view on CI/CD, I think Apollo will grow into something much bigger than what I'm currently estimating.
Yeah, and it can be sold as a separate product. It's unopinionated about what it's deploying. That doesn't mean you don't have to do work to tell it what it's deploying, to build the agents that can deploy in environments and stuff. But it could scale to do just about anything. And also, I beat up on analysts a lot, but I will point out that there was a Seeking Alpha article, I think back in 2020, that called out Apollo as potentially their biggest win, like it could be their biggest hit, and that was really insightful. Whoever wrote that article, good job.
I think that's good, man. When we are running at the end of your time, I mean, I will stay for a while. I will try to answer some of the comments which I have not addressed yet. When any final words, any final thing, or any comments which you see in the live chat which you think is worth answering at the time, please do.
Don't invest based on what the shit I say, because I'm an idiot. So like, don't be taking financial advice from me. If you saw my portfolio, you'd agree with me. So don't invest based on what I say. Do your own due diligence, figure it out for yourself. The other is that get ready for a rocky road. We're in the start of a multi-year journey. Like I tried to kind of demonstrate where AWS was in 2006, and like they really did get kicked in the teeth for a long time. And so like, don't think tomorrow we're going to the moon or something. Like this is going to be a rocky ride, and if you're not in it to win it, and like if you can't handle your shit being in the red for 8 years, like get out. Like just the stock isn't for you. This is a high risk, high reward game. So yeah, I would say like just don't. It's not going to be all roses. So just be prepared
No,
for that.
it's not buckshot. It's a violent stock. I mean, that's what I
Exactly.
say. The ride up or ride down in this stock is a very violent ride. If it's not everyone to stomach it,
Yep.
and if you are in this stock, then you really have to be in the product and in the
Yep.
company and the mission. If you are looking for day-to-day basis and quarterly basis, man, it's going to be a very painful and
Oh, it's
sad
going to be
journey for all of
brutal.
us.
Exactly. So anyway, I really appreciate you having me on, and this is an epic conversation, man. Like I love talking with technical people and just being able to talk shop about the industry. It's just like it's kind of like therapy, I
No,
think.
and
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it because my life is becoming more discussing with executives and regulators and I miss actually I started a couple of programs with MIT now because I don't want to lose
Nice.
my touch and my idea is like that the first version of my SaaS at least like I want to do the basic version 0.1 entirely on my own as a full stack. So that's my like my target to learn things.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Well, thank you, and thank you, everyone. I gotta go. Time to go hang out with the family. I'll see you.
Okay,
Bye.
take care, man. Let me stay and answer some more questions. So, guys, let me take some of the questions which have not yet been answered, and let me start with the Brett one first. That see the thing what I have seen like the contracts like Skybus and Hyundai. I mean, the idea is that if they are creating an alpha value, that means their competition will be forced. But I do expect companies to have some sort of like exclusivity agreement also. So when they are trying to build a similar product in a similar energy or similar air aviation sector, there may be some barriers that will not allow them to work with a lot of competition. For example, of Hyundai or Skybus. But what does it mean that if the product is so good, um, will it? So in case of Airbus, I do not think that it will make decision that somebody buying Airbus versus Boeing because it's a very large decision. But people who are buying Airbus, if they are getting more value out of it, they are more likely to stick with the ecosystem of Airbus going forward if they are considering this as a value. In the case of Hyundai Allbank, it is going to be very different because here the insight is they are selling mostly the insight part. So who is selling best insight is pretty much getting most customer in my opinion. Okay. Palantir calls option, man. You know that I never say what the price will look like. See, think about this, man. When you take an option, and I'll be doing a video on this tomorrow. But think about an option is there are several decisions you make. I buy a stock, end of story. It's going up, it's going down. When you're going buying an option, you are taking a time that what time it is going to be. You're also looking at the volatility, how it is going to be. You're also looking for a lot of gain, like how fast it is going to be. You mix the strategy along going with it. So better model it. And yeah, I mean, market gets things wrong, right? It's do not think what market is thinking and how the market says. Market missed Tesla, market missed Amazon, a lot of things. So what do you define? So think about people and investors that how they try to value it. I think that's Palantir's ability to scale is an execution risk. Whether they do it this year, next year, 5 years down the line, that's a real risk. Okay, and it carries on their investment in my point of view. And that's all I can say on the investment side. I'm not an investment expert in this way. So yeah, don't take investment advice from me just solely. Okay, like this question we already answered like the Apollo. Yes, I do think Apollo can be commercialized on its own, and this is what CodeStrap has also discussed. I think he and I both stay under NDAs to actually discuss more details how it will be done, but we do see both that Apollo is far bigger than how market is currently seeing it. And the same question from the army that came. I think they started commercializing already, but there will be more models. And guys, I have discussed this earlier also that there is Apollo is not the only thing changing. Like CodeStrap said that you go into this one piece solution, and also think in terms of like I discussed about the edge that people are getting more and more edge. So, because see when you have an IoT devices or you want to push a model to the edge, the bandwidth is always a concern. Now you have a Starlink 5G, so bandwidth has gone down. So now the type of IoT devices you are going to build is also going to be different because you can push a lot of models to the edge now. So putting this together, that means the edge deployment and edge management is also going to be complicated. So that creates more value for Apollo, in my opinion, moving forward. Does Foundry auto-generate ML models based on the underlying data and the question that needs to be answered? I think auto generate ML model offered it exists in a lot of software, this functionality, at least at this point, right? I think it's not the value of auto generating ML model, which is definitely robust both in Foundry and Gotham. I think it is more the ability to access the data. Like CodeStrap said, and I said also, like 80% time is putting things together that you need to do before you even do any kind of ML generation. And that 80% Foundry can compress into a very short time, and that is the value. Now, once the models are generated, how they are kept alive, like for example, we discussed the idea of ontology in past. I think that is another advantage that comes with it. And let's see how much use cases we see moving forward in terms of it. Does Foundry make cybersecurity obsolete? Definitely no. In terms of Foundry, I mean, it comes with a package where you can have cybersecurity inside, but cybersecurity itself is quite a bigger beast to tackle. I mentioned a little while earlier that CI/CD is one area where I see is going to be the next $100 billion company. Cybersecurity is also one sector where I'm going to see that some real companies are emerging. In CI/CD, one of my favorite company is Harness. In in terms of cybersecurity, I really like Traceable AI. I mean, but there are plenty companies that are coming up in this domain. Both are private, so yeah, you cannot invest at this particular point. Say, CodeStrap said that interaction with Palantir sales team is so. I mean, yeah, I mean, he is under NDAs and he is evaluating Foundry for builders. I mean, I have in my interactions with Palantir sales teams also. Progress cannot be shared. I think that is part of deal for both of us. I think I'm really sorry on that, but in future, I think once we are out, we'll have some final things to show. We'll definitely share more things about it. Will the simple vanilla use cases that will use the predominant cases in the future, they're always much less people and need space. So I think that's a very good way, because right now what is happening, see a lot of people who went into this euphoria, like you see people sitting on CNBC and they talk about data like they know everything out. See, people are trying to imagine best of their ability that how data will be utilized. But actually, when you will have the data models running, the data layers running, that particular time people will actually start thinking, okay, this problem, how to sort it, and you will actually see much more unique cases and innovation cases that time. So I agree that the vanilla use cases at this particular point is pretty much driving, but that should not be the norm moving forward in coming time. Okay. Yeah, it's 1:42. I'm a strategy consultant, so I can really push to the late. I think that's pretty much it. Palantir's anti-fragile gets stronger with every crisis. I hope so. That's pretty much how I see it as well. But never underestimate other companies and the innovation of anyone has in Silicon Valley. I mean, these companies can really throw surprises. People can really come up with solutions, both in terms of business model and technology. That so it's better to stay on the edge as much as possible. So Datadog revenue 328 grew 84%. See, Datadog, what it is doing, I think I already mentioned yesterday on my Twitter. I think this is one company that has impressed me a lot. Okay, but this is what I think people also have to remember: how you are looking, which version of future you want to bet. So I'm talking to my circle and my clients a lot of time, and I'm seeing that these things have a ceiling that will be reached. They are very simple to understand at this point to approach client can apply it with very little change management. So it's a good phase for them. So how these companies evolve in the future, that is also very important. But you need to understand that they are doing a piece of work. What does that mean? Is that means they are working with several partners, or they need to grow vertically by inorganic expansion at some point of time, which is not that easy, because then the cultures will be mixed, and two companies today that are working together, in future they will grow at a different pace. So the what works today may not work tomorrow. So the see, nothing is risk free. Sometimes you just don't see the risk. So this is what, at the end of the day, people have to remember, that when they are going with Palantir, what risk, what doors they are opening, what doors they are closing, or well, they are going with somebody else, that what's the trade-off involved. There is that's pretty much the key part is. I agree with Palantir that Google is final boss. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have played video game, you know what does the main final boss means. At the end of the day, if Palantir grow and it appears, or it emerges from the section of its peers as the leading contender, yeah, I think the showdown is very clear that it is going to be with Google most likely. See, I think the Palantir products are exceptional. I think one thing which I realized over the time is, and the people is like when we call about Foundry is like 500 different products. So even like when I say Foundry is good, I mean I don't know even 90% of those products. So Palantir has a lot of exceptional products. The way they can be packaged, I think we'll know it more when they come up with more solutions. Like for example, they came up with Foundry for crypto, Foundry for say biotech. I think then we'll probably start learning more about it. But I can tell you, like, if you break Foundry into separate packages, you can probably build 20 companies out of it. That's my view. So the next one I'm taking that other than creating a daft community and modularizing Foundry, what else Palantir should do? See, revenue will be generated when people will buy it. So they need to have the right brand awareness. They also need to be very clear that what value it creates in a certain sector on a certain use case, especially the complex one. Okay, that is very important. I think, I don't know, like if you go on YouTube and you see the videos of AWS reinvent, I think developer community is a cult. You need to build that cult around you, and when the cult is built, I think people start shunning things out. Palantir developer community has not reached that point. So until and unless, so that's what I said, the developer community does, this is a very early stage of it, and it has to really become that cult like what retail is today for Palantir. The developers have to achieve the same kind of level, because then they become the salesman for the company and its product. That has not happened yet. So I think that is, to me, that is one of the big block Palantir has to tackle as they move forward. If I could ask Alex one quarterly question, I mean, my answer is always in this, that uh, how they are going to plan to make this thing products, because like I said, Foundry is like a 500 products. How would you ensure that more and more products can reach? Earlier I had a question which was more on this lines that why you are not able to dominate a sector, but now I am also learning that a lot of time when they went in that sector early, they made some exclusivity agreement which kind of stopped them. So in hindsight, I could ask, like, are they expecting a lot of these the exclusivity agreement to expire? I know that few have expired recently, so let that pretty much all, because that is, in my view, is holding growth for a while now. So because a lot of other companies are reaching customers, so they really need to reach the customer. So let's see, now they're going to hire almost 1,000 people this year, and how overall it works out. So I think that's all, guys, from my side, and I don't see any further questions. So let me take pause here. It is 1:47 a.m. in Malaysia. See, CodeStrap and I are in a very different time zone. He was having 8 a.m. in the morning, and I have to get it 12 in the midnight. That's the only way to work, so that we can get a block of like almost like 1 hour 30 minutes to have this chat. I really wanted this conversation. The reason for that is people like me and CodeStrap, we rarely talk on a stock. People like me, actually, they don't even come on social media. So the kind of circles we work, and people like CodeStrap, they are working on a lot of work. They don't get to jump on the social media. So I think from that point of view, I felt that it's a very unique discussion, and most of us can actually, yeah, we can touch the topics which are more technical on the product side, because a lot of time people say that we don't understand Foundry. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting you guys to understand Foundry or Palantir also, but we just try to share with you that how do we see, and based on our respective experience in industry, how do we come to know about it, and how do we see moving it forward, and what are our key signs looking forward. Okay, do they build more developer community? This is something we were discussing few days back. Now the sign is this. Now we want to see how this developer community grows, and we are taking as a proxy that if all these things work, eventually business will do well. So yeah, let's see how it works out. We don't, nobody knows the future. This is how we think. Hopefully everyone had some good takeout from this discussion. Feel free to leave your comments, and I will try to have more discussions like this in future. And good night, everyone. Good night, good morning, good afternoon. See you next time. I think this is the end of today's broadcast.